with that door.
Nice. Nice and easy.
So easy.
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 Say easy.
So easy.
Say nice and easy.
Oh,
Nice and easy. Nice and easy.
yeah.
For the first time in quite a long while, we weren't immediately clear on what conversation to begin with today. I mean, looking at the tensions on our border issue, do you know what? Does this ever happen to you? Well, of course it doesn't. You don't present a live radio programme every day. But just as I said those words, I saw a thread of consistency running through the contenders to be spoken about. Because just bear with me, all right? Stop talking among yourselves. Just bear with me. I need to get this crystal clear. But my colleagues thought I was actually addressing them directly then when I said stop talking among yourselves. It was a figure of speech, like sometimes when I say, are you still with me at the back? But actually, while we're here, do stop talking among yourselves. I was going to talk about how Michael Gove is currently trying to reduce the friction at an Irish sea border that Boris Johnson says doesn't exist. Sometimes I think I should say things 2 or 3 times, because even I respond to those words by going, have you just got your words the wrong way round? Have you just got things mixed up? Michael Gove is currently negotiating... No, well, look, let's be honest. Let's call a spade a spade. Michael, having taken back control from the EU, Michael Gove is currently begging the EU to reduce the friction at an Irish sea border that Boris Johnson insists doesn't exist. Right? Boris Johnson, it was announced, I think last night, says that Matt Hancock will today deliver a speech or lay out the plans under which our borders will finally supposedly be closed. Nadeem Zahawi, the vaccines minister, was on the radio a couple of hours ago saying, actually, no, he won't. So it's not quite the theory of the coin toss, is it? The theory of the perpetual coin toss, as we might call it. The Donald Trump tactic of tossing a coin, shouting heads and tails, and then doing a lap of honour wherever it lands. But as things stand... OK, and then we'll add Grant Shapps to the mix, just for fun. Or whatever he's calling himself this week. So, story 1... The Prime Minister says that the Secretary of State for Health is going to lay out the quarantine plans for people coming into this country from parts of the world where particularly virulent variants are running amok. Boris Johnson says Matt Hancock is going to do it. The Vaccines Minister says no, he isn't. Not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But soon, and for the rest of your life. You come on! And then Michael Gove, having taken back control from the EU, and remember, he's the one who said, we will hold all the cards. Michael Gove is currently begging the European Commission to reduce the amount of friction at the Irish sea border that Boris Johnson still says doesn't exist. And that, listen, I'm seeing the funny side, but that's failed state territory. And that is such a mess that it almost... I mean, I kind of understand why people in the right-wing media would rather sort of talk about, I don't know, a priest that's already said sorry for saying something stupid, or Ursula von der Leyen nearly doing something stupid last Friday. Because the reality of what we're actually looking at right in front of us today is almost, even by the standards of Brexit and Boris Johnson, it's almost unbelievably bonkers. Where to begin? Why haven't we shut the borders? Well, don't worry, the Secretary of State for Health is going to make an announcement about the borders later today, said the Prime Minister. No, he isn't, said the Vaccines Minister. Heads, tails, doesn't matter where it lands. Yeah? So, we've already asked the question many times. Me say many, many, many times. We've already asked the question, why haven't we shut the borders? And we still don't know. I get it's kind of one theory. There's some sort of ideological objection to it. From within the cabinet. But where is it coming from? We do not know. Priti Patel broke cover. Great shame that she had to pull out of appearing on Nick's show yesterday, because I was going to ring in, ask her a few questions. But hey, we'll have to wait until the next time. 0345 6060 973 if you need to take a note of it. So she's already broken cover saying we should have done it last March. You sense that Matt Hancock would quite like to shut all the borders. Has the Transport Secretary, before he said that weird thing about Australia, I don't know. I don't even know what name he uses from one day to the next, let alone what he actually believes in a sort of either an ideological or a principled sense. And then Northern Ireland, which you will remember, we were told on this programme by everybody from the J-Dog himself right down to the rank and file of Brexit supporters, we were told that Ireland was not a problem. Do you remember? Oh, it can all be fixed with technological solutions. We'll be fine under WTO rules. The very, very simple observation that you cannot have regulatory alignment on the island of Ireland and two separate customs unions or markets was just true. I'm so sorry. I really am. It's flesh-coloured body stocking territory. You know, Daily Mail might call me a tub-thumping radio presenter, but I wish I'd thumped my tub a little harder on the Irish question. I really do. I wish I'd thumped my tub about as hard as it's possible to thump a tub. I wish I'd thumped my tub so hard that my tub was no longer a tub, but was as flat as a pancake. A flattened tub. A tub thumped so comprehensively and completely that there is no longer a tub to speak of, because it was always going to come down to Ireland. And I made my greatest Brexit, possibly my only Brexit mistake when it came to Ireland, because, well, you know what we did, don't you? Everyone's made this mistake at some point. It's just that some of us are able to admit it. I believed Boris Johnson. I know. I believed Boris Johnson. When Theresa May said that no British Prime Minister could possibly countenance a border in the Irish Sea, she meant it. That's why we ended up with the UK-wide backstop, which would have seen the whole of the United Kingdom remain in the customs union and or the single market, right? But up with that, J-Dog and his pals, little Marquis Francois, and Brexit hardman Steve Baker, and Ian Duncan Smith, we don't need to look at this deal. We've spent years debating Brexit, and then 9 months later insisting that we abandon the terms of the deal that we didn't need to scrutinise because he understood it all so completely. Oh, it's nice to get back into this territory, isn't it, after a while, albeit that we're now contemplating it from the perspective of seeing our own country circle the plug hole, which, of course, is exactly what people knew they were voting for and the mark of a true patriot. So it was always going to come back to Ireland, and I won't say this again, last time, I promise, I wish I'd thumped that tub properly, because it was actually obvious. The first person to explain it to us, and I may be over-romanticising this slightly, but I think the first person to explain it to us had built an extension on their house since the arrival of the Good Friday Agreement, and it meant that their bathroom was in Northern Ireland and the rest of their house was actually in the Republic. And the idea that his bathroom would be subject to one set of rules and his bedroom would be subject to another was one of those little moments on this programme where, back in the day, before I became a little more calcified and cynical, I thought observations like that would really force the penny to drop for absolutely anybody listening. So I've never been arrogant enough to think we were going to make much difference to the bigger picture. But you know, I'm lucky enough to get bombarded with communications from all sorts of boneheaded Brexiters, racists and sundry other bigots. And I always naively hope that if you treat them with a little bit of respect and show them the actual facts, then at some point they're going to have to admit it. That's where the theory of the flesh-coloured body stocking came from, because I'd sit here and I'd say, how can you possibly have a deal or a treaty that is going to leave our friend Pat obeying one set of rules in his bathroom regarding everything from food hygiene right through to bivalve mollusks? He's going to be obeying one set of rules in his bathroom and a completely different set of rules in his bedroom. And I would have thought, and I did naively think for a day or two, that when you point out stuff like this, everybody eventually has to go, oh. But the fact that they didn't go, oh, they went, red herring, technical solutions, cheap shoes for peasants, we hold all the cards, made me, as a trusting, naive, innocent soul, it made me go, well, maybe you've got it wrong, Jimbo. Maybe there is a way in which Pat can have one set of rules and regulations in his bathroom and a completely different set of rules and regulations in his bedroom. Maybe the Emperor isn't naked. Maybe he's wearing a flesh-coloured body stocking. And here we are. This is not an opinion. This is a fact. Michael Gove is currently begging the European Union to reduce the amount of friction at an Irish sea border that Boris Johnson insists doesn't exist. Just think about that for a minute. Even if you think I'm the spawn of Satan and every syllable that's emerged from my mouth since 2016 is dripping with deceit and disingenuousness, just listen to this sentence. Having taken back control, Michael Gove is currently begging the EU to reduce the amount of friction at an Irish sea border that Boris Johnson insists doesn't exist. What do you want me to do today, Boris? Well, little Mick, I'd like you to go and negotiate with the European Commission about reducing the amount of friction at the Irish sea border. But you say, so there is an Irish sea border? No, don't be ridiculous. Of course there isn't. How can I negotiate to reduce the amount of friction at an Irish sea border if there isn't an Irish sea border? That's why we pay you the big money, Mickey. You get yourself over. You lay down the law to Johnny Foreigner and you tell him we want less friction at the Irish sea border that doesn't actually exist. Ah, Winston Churchill, cogito ergo sum. And that, I'm afraid, is your starter at 10 this morning. You may need to be on the island of Ireland to answer this question. And I don't care which corner of the Emerald Isle you inhabit. I want to hear you try to make sense of this. I would love to talk to you if you are still on the Brexit bus and you can actually provide a rational evidence-based answer to the question of how Michael Gove can negotiate to reduce friction at an Irish sea border that Boris Johnson says doesn't exist. And the bigger question, of course, becomes, I don't think we're ready to do this yet. How did we come to this? Seriously. How far and how fast can a country fall? But no, let's stay with the possible answerable question, and that is this. And hit the numbers now, you will get through. If you're in Northern Ireland, if you're in the Republic of Ireland, if you're remotely involved in trade or whatever it may be, just have a crack at telling me how we've, not just, of course, because it's a slightly facetious question. Michael Gove can't reduce the amount of friction at an Irish sea border that doesn't exist, because it does exist. That's one of Boris Johnson's barefaced lies. I know that, you know that, so I'm being a little bit glib. But actually, the bigger question then becomes, how have we ended up, and I'd love you to think about this, actually, and you can answer this wherever you are in the world. You don't even ever have to have visited the island of Ireland. But how has the United Kingdom, how have the people of these islands, how have we, all of us, however we vote, wherever we live, whatever we do, how have we ended up living in a country where a senior politician is negotiating to reduce friction at an Irish sea border that his boss says doesn't exist? Have we distilled it down yet? I just want to get it absolutely into phone-in territory. So how have we ended up living in a country where Michael Gove is trying to reduce the amount of friction at an Irish sea border that Boris Johnson says doesn't exist? Are we good, Keith, or do you think we could shave it a little bit more? Can we get it down even? Can it get even pithier? And we can't just do WTF, can we? That would be both a little bit profane and lazy. But there it is. Hit the numbers now. You will get through. And I need help with this because I haven't got a Scooby-Doo. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And here is the question. How do you, particularly as a Brexiteer, if that's what you still call yourselves, or perhaps an ex-Brexiteer, or whatever it may be, but particularly if you're a Brexiteer, how do you think we've ended up living in a country where one of the co-chairmen of Vote Leave is negotiating with the European Union to reduce the amount of friction at an Irish sea border that the other co-chairman of Vote Leave says doesn't exist? Riddle me that. You're going to have to hope that Diversity do something vaguely controversial soon, or that the National Trust start putting up more posters explaining the history of their houses, because things are not looking good. From whatever angle you may be viewing proceedings with regards to Northern Ireland. But kudos to Jeff Green. I said that I'd like Brexiters to get in touch and talk me through how they think we've ended up in a place where Michael Gove is negotiating to reduce the amount of friction at a border in the Irish Sea that Boris Johnson says doesn't exist. And Jeff Green in Blackburn has stepped up to the plate. If James O'Brien, writes Jeff, hates our government so much, why doesn't he emigrate? About time he was replaced. Jeff, unwittingly, and one imagines that almost everything he does is unwitting, but also unintentionally answering the question. That, Jeff, is exactly how we've ended up in a place where Michael Gove is now negotiating to reduce the amount of friction at an Irish sea border that Boris Johnson says doesn't exist. Because of people like you. And you're still waving your little flag. And you're not allowed to tell me to emigrate, mate, because I'm white. You can only say that to people of colour. If you don't like it here, why don't you go and live somewhere else? That kind of thing, yeah? Anyway, Jeff, I look forward to your next communication. Let us head to Kilkeel in Northern Ireland for, I hope, a slightly more serious answer to the question. And you are, as ever, welcome to challenge the parameters of the question. I think I've got it bang to right, so I don't think I've misrepresented the facts at all. But if I have, the door is open. 0345 606 0973. But the question is a simple one. How have we ended up looking at a news agenda that simply describes Michael Gove asking, I'll stop saying begging, it's a bit provocative, I could understand, you've got enough wounds to lick without me adding a new one. How can we end up in a place where Michael Gove is asking the European Union to soften a border that Boris Johnson insists doesn't even exist? Patrick's in Kilkeel. Patrick, what have you got?
The whole solution. Not really.
On the front page, I think they used to say.
I'll be in the Times later.
Yes, you will.
If I lived in England, to go back a little bit, if I lived in England and had no connection with Northern Ireland, I think every time Northern Ireland came up on the news or the radio, I would have switched off or switched over. And I suspect a lot of people are in the same situation. I don't blame them for that, not at all.
Yes.
But I think Boris is in the same situation and those around him. He's not a man known for studying detail. I think Theresa May was much more over it. And he just had no idea about the border. He wasn't involved in any of the negotiations here in the peace process. And so if he ever came to the realisation of the problems there would be, they just lost them over in the referendum. And the ministers, they say, for the 15th century, Jacob Rees-Mogg is known to be over technical things. Said it could all be solved with technical.
How dare you suggest that he doesn't have a full grasp of the facts? And of course, his insistence that the lot of British fishermen would be improved has come to glorious fruition. No one could possibly dispute the veracity of that prediction. Now, everyone,
the happy British fish, yeah.
Let me find the phrase.
Yes.
Boris Johnson did everything he could for to avoid a barrier down the Irish Sea. He did everything he could to avoid a barrier down the Irish Sea, to which the short response would be, well, he didn't vote for Theresa May's... Well, he did vote for one of them, didn't he? But Theresa May's UK-wide backstop, which would have been, if you insisted on leaving the single market and the customs union officially, the only way to avoid what we're now seeing in Northern Ireland would have been the Theresa May UK-wide backstop.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So,
and then when they turned that down, that's the DUP here, for example, there only was one option left, which was to put a border somewhere. And you'd have to have something like 322 checkpoints on the land border. So a sea border is much easier with 4 or 5 ports to check what's going in and out. And, I mean, Boris promised people here there'd be no paperwork. There's film of them doing it.
I may have that clip. So don't let the cat out of the bag. Because here's the thing: I hesitate when discussing political matters with a resident of Northern Ireland. I hesitate to bring religion into it, Patrick. But speaking as a Catholic, I have this curious mixture of relief and guilt. It's always a relief to realise that you did understand things completely, but then you get that old Catholic guilt kicking in because you failed to convince or you failed to. And I'm only talking about the people like Jeff in Blackburn who get in touch with me, and I somehow failed to persuade him that the grass was green and the sun would come up in the morning. And it is as simple under your analysis as saying, how has this happened? It's happened because Boris Johnson tells lies. People believe him.
Yeah. And I've heard traders on here saying we were told there was going to be no paperwork. He told us that, and they believed him.
Well, I don't know that you've got any proof of that particular claim there.
Can I ask one question?
One question.
One question.
Yeah.
Can I go back to my company in the morning and tell my staff we will not be filling in any customs declarations for goods leaving Northern Ireland to go to GB?
You can.
Okay.
You can.
That's not what everybody believes, by the way.
You can.
But I can.
You can. And you will absolutely not have. And if somebody asks you to do that, tell them to ring up the Prime Minister and I will direct them to throw that form in the bin.
Because Steve Harvey said we would.
No.
That's the problem.
What do you export from your... Do you export illegal weapons or endangered species?
If you part of the business, we export a lot of small...
Oh, sorry, I owe you an apology, Patrick. He did. I mean, there might be a technical, pedantic point to be made about which direction the traffic was going in, but the existence of the Irish sea border is now a given.
Yes, exactly. And the problem of bringing dogs in and so on probably applies as much to sort of puppy farms, and that they don't want them going on into the EU over the border here.
Well,
it's very permeable.
The weirdest thing is that actually some of these rules to the uninitiated do look a little bit excessive. For example, why on earth are you checking soil samples? And then a caller came on yesterday and said, well, you remember foot and mouth was being carried around on the soles of welly boots. So, you know, we helped write the rules that third countries have to obey. We voted to become a third country. We're now throwing our toys out the pram about the rules that third countries have to obey. Patrick, you've got the first spot on the list. How have we ended up in a place where Michael Gove is negotiating over an Irish sea border that Boris Johnson insists doesn't exist? Answer, because Boris Johnson tells lies and people still believe him. It might take some beating, actually. Is there a more nuanced, a more sophisticated, a more informed, not informed, but more elusive explanation, perhaps, than the one that Patrick has offered? I'm not so sure. And, of course, it's very, very unfair to suggest that Boris Johnson alone insisted that the border Michael Gove is currently trying to negotiate over doesn't actually exist. I mean, it's not as if the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland said it too.
But we are not going to have a border down the Irish Sea.
Pardon?
But we are not going to have a border down the Irish Sea.
But we do. That's the thing Michael Gove is negotiating over, Brandon Lewis, Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. So how have we ended up in a country where the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland can say this...
But we are not going to have a border down the Irish Sea.
And the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom can agree with him, but Michael Gove, the Prime Minister's former colleague at the head of Vote Leave, can now be negotiating with the European Commission. I say negotiating, it's all under their control, just like the bivalve mollusk story from yesterday, 100% in the control of the EU Commission. We are asking them on bended knee to extend the grace period to 2023, having insisted and voted to put a very hard stop on the transition period. So how has my country, and I'm going to say that because I think, you know, all this bleating about patriotism overlooks the fact that the people that have punctured all four of our tyres are the ones that insist those of us who would rather have inflated tyres somehow don't like our country. So how has my country ended up being led by men who are simultaneously begging to reduce friction at a border and claiming that the border doesn't exist? Got there in the end, Keith. That's the pithy line. We are led by men who simultaneously seek to reduce friction at a border and claim that that border doesn't even exist. I've got a second answer to the question of how we've ended up in a place where Michael Gove is having to beg the EU to reduce friction at an Irish sea border that Boris Johnson says doesn't exist. The first one, of course, come straight in from Kilkeel, from Patrick. Boris Johnson lies and people believe him. And then Jeff in Blackburn, unintentionally, joined by this texter here, who writes, I think you guys on the left hate the fact he seems to be getting away with it. Long may it continue. So how have we ended up being an absolute joke of a country? For now, everything's fixable. Answer, well, it's there. When they find out they've been conned, these people claim to like being conned because it upsets people who don't like con men. That's reason two of how we've ended up where we are. So our friend here, and of course Steve, the famous caller from a couple of years ago when discussing Donald Trump, he said, I know he's lying, but I love it because it upsets people like you and Sadiq Khan. It's a big part of it. You thought I was exaggerating when I said that was a real Rosetta Stone for understanding the movements and the tides that led to a bloke in an Auschwitz T-shirt marching into the Capitol while claiming to be doing the work of Donald Trump. Oh, I love it because it upsets people like you and Sadiq Khan. Okay, Okay, come back to me when the bloke in the Auschwitz T-shirt has stormed the Capitol building. So, and there's our anonymous friend texting in. I think you guys on the left hate the fact that he seems to be getting away with it. So let's just translate that into reality. I think you guys on the left, whatever the heck that means, because Jeremy Corbyn bears more responsibility for Brexit than just about anybody else in the country. I think you guys on the left hate the fact that he lies to me. Long may it continue. Oh, no, that's not fair. Let me go further. I think you guys on the left, brackets, no idea what that means, but I've been told to use it as a handy pejorative, close brackets, hate the fact that he is getting away with lying to people like me. Long may it continue. So how have we ended up with the Prime Minister saying that an Irish sea border doesn't exist, while Michael Gove is begging the European Union to reduce the amount of friction at the Irish sea border? Answer: well, because when people find out they've been conned, they claim to actually like being conned because it upsets the people who don't like con men. Brexit Britain. Arguably, in a nutshell. Fintan is in Lurgan in County Armagh, also for the uninitiated in Northern Ireland. Fintan, what's your explanation?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Well, I can give you one part of the explanation is our friends in the DUP
Yes.
rejected Mrs May's deal, which, although it wasn't great, was a whole lot better than what we have now.
This would be the UK-wide backstop?
Yes.
Why did the DUP reject it? Can you remember?
Well, actually, I was on your show a few months ago, James, and I gave you my opinion, and then you asked me a question. You asked me, why did they do it? I was stumped, and I said, I don't know, but I've thought about it, and now I think I do know.
Go on.
And with growing up for nearly 60 years with the DUP, it's a deep-seated hatred of all things Irish, and it's near an illness. And the thing about it is, I work in the butchers, and I've been talking to all different shades of people every day. The ordinary Unionist people aren't like that. You know, I hate labels, but the Protestant people, the Unionist people, the people who believe that to be themselves to be British, they're not really like that. You've got a small rump, and that's it. And the DUP are feeding on this. They're whipping up hysteria.
But listen, some people won't like your characterisation of the DUP, but it's a phone-in show. They're welcome to ring in and tell us why. 03456060973. It doesn't. I mean, even let's let it pass. A deep-seated hatred of Ireland, the Republic of Ireland,
of all things Irish,
of all things
not
Irish,
not the Republic of Ireland.
No, of all things Irish,
all things Irish. Which
but why would that? Why would that propel them to vote against the UK-wide backstop, which?
Well, if you roll it back a wee bit, they were saying at the time that they wanted to be treated the same as the rest of the UK.
Yes.
Yeah. But their policies weren't the same as the rest of any other party in the UK, i.e. you've got a language, you've got the Scottish language, you've got the Welsh language, but they wouldn't have the Irish language.
I'm being unfair. I'm being unfair to you, aren't I? I'm asking you to provide a rationale for the actions of the DUP.
Just let me provide you one which is close to my heart.
Go on.
They refused to allow same-sex marriage in Northern Ireland.
Right.
That's allowed all over the UK. It's allowed in most of Europe, but they refused to allow it in the north of Ireland. You know. Right. And it was, I think the Republic of Ireland was one of the first to allow it, and it was smashing. And then they had Taoiseach who was
married, I think. Was he married to his partner?
Yeah, well, he has a partner, a long-time partner, which was marvellous. But yet they refused it. And yet they wanted to be treated as the rest of the UK, so it's just completely hypocritical.
So did they think that if we went into a UK-wide backstop, they wouldn't be able to opt out of things like same-sex marriage? I mean, it's been legal since 2020, as you know, since my birthday, actually, in 2020.
There you go. I think, if you were trying to understand, and you're trying to understand rational people.
That's our curse. That's our curse, Fintan.
Yeah, it's very hard to understand their rationale.
or is
don't
it?
live in the real world.
No, I
and the
know.
only good
Well,
thing-
look, we're up against that brick wall again, aren't we?
Yeah.
Where we expect reason to sort of come careering round the corner to make some sense of the situation. Just to be clear, from Northern Ireland, does my characterisation of the situation ring true to you? We now have Michael Gove seeking to negotiate changes to an Irish sea border that Boris Johnson insists doesn't exist.
But the thing about it is, I don't want to harp on about the DUP, but I try not to sit on I don't sit on tall chairs now, because once Boris has already screwed them, they use Paisley and Paisley's language. Once he screwed them over, I don't want to sit in the high chair because he's going to screw them over again, and I don't want to fall too far. I don't want to bump my head out of the ground.
I hear you. No, Vincent, thank you. And of course, speaking of Ian Paisley Jr., it was in response to a question from him that Boris Johnson said yesterday that he would be quite prepared to trigger Article 16. And it was, of course, the threat to trigger Article 16 that, as long as you don't actually think about things, that put Ursula von der Leyen into such an uncomfortable position briefly last Friday. Look, I'm trivialising it slightly, probably in response to the fact that the dishonest media, the client journalists, which is about 80% of them now, isn't it, by any count, probably even 90, are massively inflating what happened last Friday. So it isn't trivial. It was an appalling misstep by the Commission, which was reversed before it was implemented, within hours. But of course, and actually, come here a minute, because if you are still clinging to the carcass of Brexit being a good idea, you've already won. I know I'm going to have to stop at some point pointing out the error, because there's not a great deal of point to it. And you know, my great fear was always that the people who flogged you this absolute joke would, if they were not challenged, if the truth were not told, the people who flogged you this joke would go on to be in charge of something really, really important. So thank God they didn't end up being in charge of our response to a global pandemic and ending up with the largest death toll on the planet, because that really would have been awful, wouldn't it? As a direct result of not holding them to account for the lies that they told in the run-up to 2016 and afterwards. So I think we can all breathe a massive sigh of relief that Boris Johnson and Michael Gove, having flogged the con of Vote Leave and all the myriad lies that were attached to that campaign, didn't end up in charge of the country as we were facing an unprecedented threat to all of our lives. Phew. Oh, absolute, I mean, huge relief all round on that one. And that was always the fear. So they're in charge now. The worst possible thing has already happened, so my entire rationale for banging on about Brexit has actually disappeared. You didn't hold them to account, you didn't expose their lies, you didn't accept the observable reality of your own eyes and ears, and they ended up in charge for the next issue, which turned out to be a global pandemic, which turned out to see the UK recording the highest death toll in the world. Of countries with a population of greater than 20 million, although I'm told we might have just nudged Slovenia into third, actually, even if you include countries with a population of... I need to double-check that. So, Boris Johnson lies and people believe him. That's answer number one. When they find out they've been lied to, they claim to actually like it because it upsets people who don't like liars. And if you call them lefties, it makes it a lot easier to avoid the pant-wetting stupidity of that sort of sentiment. As long as you sort of call them lefties or introduce phrases like people like you and Sadiq Khan, then the stupidity of saying, I really like being lied to because it upsets them over there who don't like liars, can just about be evaded. Kevin is in, again, County Down. Kevin, what is going on?
Good morning, James.
Hello.
Long-time listener, first-time caller.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. I think the DUP position is quite an easy one to understand, and I think the lack of understanding from Boris Johnson is easy to understand. As you can tell from my accent, I'm not a native. I've lived here 18 years now.
You're the landlord class. Sorry, that was a very unnecessary historical nod towards even greater controversy than the ones we're currently dealing with. Carry on, Kevin.
That's okay. No, I'm not a landlord.
I know you're not. But usually that accent, it doesn't matter. You know what?
Sorry.
Carry on.
Yeah, I mean, as a perspective, before I lived in Northern Ireland, and I'm a son of an Irishman, I knew nothing about Northern Ireland, and I knew nothing about trade and borders. Having living here now, working in the trade that trades across borders, I understand it. And Boris Johnson doesn't want to. And I think you asked a question of a caller just now about why did the DUP not support May's deal, and why do they support Johnson's deal, or whether they did support Johnson's deal. The reason they didn't support May's deal was because how they see it, that leaves Ireland intact as Ireland.
Yeah.
So what they are wholly against, they campaigned against the Good Friday Agreement because they don't want Irishness bleeding across the border into Northern Ireland. So they don't want people in Northern Ireland to feel Irish. They want us to feel British. And with May's deal, would have stopped that from happening.
Because So really, the DUP's motivation was always the possibility of resurrecting a land border on the island of Ireland.
That's all they want. They want red, white, and blue painted on every curbstone in every town in every part of
They want the
Northern
barbed
Ireland.
wire back. You think?
Absolutely, and they're a bit like I've been trying to think of how to describe this. A bit like an alcoholic chasing this drink, and this is why they've been so sycophantic to the governments. They had a sniff of power and thought they could get their agenda without actually gaming it through 5 steps, and they were played by the Conservatives, but their goal.
But Theresa May was not planning to play them, was she?
No. She used them.
She didn't
for her
perhaps
own
understand the irrational nature of their motivation as completely as you do. But when she said no British Prime Minister can countenance a border in the Irish Sea, or indeed undermine the meanings of the Good Friday Agreement, the intent of the Good Friday Agreement, she actually meant it. When Boris Johnson said no British Prime Minister can countenance a border in the Irish Sea, it was about as trustworthy as his marriage vows.
Yeah.
And that's a crucial point that everyone missed, including me, because you just wouldn't have thought anyone would lie about that or anyone would play with this particular fire. And yet here we are.
I mean, anybody who lives here, even before the Brexit vote, it was clear that there was only one solution for Brexit to happen, for Ireland to stay as it is today, which is peaceful, is a border in the Irish Sea. I was saying that in 2016 before, because it is the only way that you can do that. That GB can separate itself from Europe and not drag Northern Ireland back.
It took me a bit longer than you.
Years.
It took me. It was once it had become clear that Theresa May was prepared to offer up the abolition of freedom of movement as the only tangible benefit, and I use the word benefit very loosely in the context of having our freedoms abolished. Then the full extraction from the customs union and the single market seemed inevitable, and as soon as full extraction from the customs union and the single market seemed inevitable, then you're right. I couldn't see, and still can't, any other solution except a border in the Irish Sea. And here it is, despite the fact that the Prime Minister still denies that it's there.
I work for an English company. I live in Northern Ireland, and I bought an ex-work laptop for £30. We get new laptops every 3 or 4 years. And I was onto my office going, I've not seen it, where is it? And I spoke to them, and they can't send it, or they can send it, but they don't know what paperwork it is. And to be fair, with the issues we have sending stuff to Ireland at the minute, it's not very high priority.
And some of these issues will be fixed, some of them will be ironed out, all of them are a direct consequence of Brexit. In fact, any problem thrown up by the Northern Ireland Protocol itself, whether it's a problem that is spawned by Ursula von der Leyen or by Boris Johnson, they are all problems caused by Brexit, and it is astonishing how quickly people are trying to pretend otherwise. Not you, Kevin, clearly. And just to add to the mix, here's a little line. Michael Gove authored a 58-page document attacking the Good Friday Agreement, likening it to the appeasement of the Nazis, and even managing to attack the rights of trans people, women and the disabled in the process. Say what you like about the fella, he's a really lovely bloke. This question is, simultaneously surreal, heartbreaking, and so ploddingly predictable. Boris Johnson insists still that there is no trade barrier or border in the Irish Sea. There is a trade barrier in the Irish Sea as a direct consequence of Boris Johnson exercising powers that only a Prime Minister possesses. As ever, if you follow me on Twitter, you can see I've just retweeted David Gork retweeting David Alan Green, who is a brilliant commentator on matters of constitutional law. And you may not know this, because he doesn't like coming on the radio, but he was kind enough to come on this programme a couple of times. He feels he's at his best in prose, writing stuff down. And when I first started following him, it was as a confused follower of politics, confused by Brexit and the constitutional connotations of a lot of what was going on. And this is going to sound a little odd, and it was partly because he used to work for Bill Cash, the famously Eurosceptic MP, and I mean, for the reasons of full disclosure, an old, or at least the father of one of my oldest and closest friends. And which is why, of course, when people say that people like Dominic Raab lie about me on this very radio station and say that misrepresent my view of Brexiters, it overlooks the fact that one of my oldest and closest friends is... anyway. Because David had worked for Bill, I thought, well, here's someone I can really watch, because I don't want to be only listening to people who share my misgivings or who share my fears about Brexit. And if you go back 20 years or something, Bill Cash had two researchers in his parliamentary office. One was David Allen Green and the other was Daniel Hannan. So you could cautiously suggest that one has carried on following the facts in the ensuing decades and one has not. COVID isn't going to kill you, for example. Absolutely no one is talking about leaving the single market or the customs union. And it's a mark of Brexit Britain that Hannan is now in the House of Lords. The one that said absolutely no one is talking about leaving the single market or the customs union. The one who subsequently said coronavirus isn't going to kill you. I know what you're thinking. You're listening to this programme, it hasn't killed you. But that's not what he meant. 10:55 is the time. And you know, to be clear, what he did was reverse the policy of his predecessor. That was on the backstop. So he agreed to a withdrawal agreement which included a trade barrier down the Irish Sea, even while swaying slightly with a glass in his hand, insisting to Northern Ireland business leaders that there'd be no trade barrier down the Irish Sea. Only a Prime Minister could have done that. He then won a general election which wins a mandate, of course, for their policies. This is me praising David Allen Green's brilliant analysis. Only a Prime Minister... actually, under the terms of the fixed-term parliament, he can't call a general election, but when there is one and he wins it, he then has a mandate for the manifesto commitments, and that mandate can't really be blocked or delayed by the House of Commons. So the oven-ready deal, as it was called for a while, was mandated by the 2019 general election. So he had a mandate, he achieved that as Prime Minister, in contrast to Theresa May, and then he takes ultimate responsibility for the government's programme of legislation. So, having reversed Theresa May's policy, having signed a withdrawal agreement with the European Union, giving effect to the new policy, i.e. a trade border in the Irish Sea, he then won a mandate for that policy in a general election and introduced it, all while denying that it was being introduced, and he now, of course, bears full responsibility for the policy being implemented into domestic law with an Act of Parliament. But now we've sent Michael Gove to try and dilute the thing that not long ago was Boris Johnson's crowning glory. Charlie's in Lincoln. Charlie, what do you...
How you doing, James?
I'm grand. What do you want to say?
I just really wanted to... I was listening to your earlier callers,
yes,
who were from Ireland like myself, but from the opposite side of the fence, probably, as I would have called it.
Okay.
Them being Catholics and me growing up a Protestant. And I just wanted to agree with them that I do blame the DUP myself. I used to vote for the DUP. I was brought up in a very unionist area in the family.
Gosh.
And yeah, I think the DUP they really hate everything that's Irish, you know, whether it's the Irish Language Act or having anything to do with them. And that's how you're brought up. And it's, unfortunately, it's inbred. You know, when you're brought up in an area like I was, you couldn't see a different perspective of life, apart from that unionist #loyalist upbringing. And it took me to leave at the age of 23 and join the military.
Gosh.
To be able to look back and actually see things from a different perspective and understand that. And I believe now it's one of the things destroying the country a little bit.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that there'll be plenty of people still in the unionist community who would take issue with your conclusions and the conclusions of the earlier caller that you refer to. But it's interesting that you were born on opposite sides of the fence, so to speak. And it is something that I worry about quite a lot, actually, Charlie, because we sit here every day trying to, quotes, work things out, end quotes. And if the explanation for the thing that we're trying to work out is, at its very root, a sort of irrational hatred based upon nonsense and misunderstood history or on age-old grievances, we could sit here until, a month next Tuesday and not get any closer to what you'd call an intellectual or a philosophical answer. Why has this happened? Answer. And it ties in with the text I was taking the mickey out of slightly. It ties in with that worldview. Why has this happened? Because people don't care about the facts. They just love the idea that someone else is getting upset. So the DUP is motivated by a hatred of all things Irish. And that means that in the context of trade agreements and withdrawal agreements and trade barriers in the Irish Sea, they were almost sort of blindfolded by their own bigotries.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. I mean,
no, I'm trying to praise your words. Really. I'm trying to praise your words. I'm not offering up mine. I'm trying to summarise what you've said.
No, it's right. To me, it's been down the education. I've read a lot of books on Irish history from people from the other side, and it took me to understand that, to see from their point of view that I was brought up with Catholics to the enemy. They want to make you a Catholic. They want to make you believe everything they wanted to believe. They want Roman rule and all the things that I was taught.
And unless we understand the visceral, vitriolic nature of that worldview, we can't really understand how what's happened has happened.
That's exactly true. Yeah.
Right.
And
okay.
Again, it's just education that you need to see it from why is the Roman Catholics and the Protestant people in the position that we're in. And it spans back hundreds of years, and it's sad how it has got to where it has gotten, because it's an amazing country with amazing people, and it's just such a shame that it's being divided by.
And it's such a shame that after taking 100 steps forward, it looks now as if there is a real danger of several steps being taken backwards. Can I ask you the $6 million question? Do you mind?
Sure. Go for it.
If there was a unification referendum, how would you vote?
I would vote, and it's been going in my head for a while now, and I've had arguments with family members and friends, and I think it would be an amazing thing for the country. I think it would be a very, very good thing for Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland, but I also think at the same stage it would be a very bad thing.
That's a politician's answer, Charlie. My goodness me. On the other hand, all right, I won't push you.
I'm trying to be very pragmatic. It's
of course.
More because it's so deeply inset, there will be elements, and I'm going back into paramilitaries and stuff, who will absolutely hate, and it will cause an uproar for a while maybe.
And they are already not on manoeuvres. That would be an inappropriate way of describing it, but they're making more noise than they've made for a while.
Yeah,
So you're still on the fence, as it were.
I would be in the fence. I know exactly how I would vote.
Go on. Well, you're just not going to tell me.
I would tell you I'd vote for United Ireland.
There you go. And as he said himself, born and bred Unionist. That's what Brexit's done. It's turned everything upside down and divided the world, or divided the United Kingdom, or divided this part of the planet into people that understand stuff and people who don't, with the government being the poster boys for the people who don't understand anything. And that is how you end up with Boris Johnson insisting that there's no border in the Irish Sea, and Michael Gove begging the European Union to reduce the friction at the border in the Irish Sea. Let's move on let's move on completely. Although we remain in the Lewis Carroll corners of governance, because it was announced, I can't keep up with, that's a bit cocky. I can't keep up with developments as quickly as they unfold. Downing Street said that Matt Hancock would today lay out the details of how the quarantine hotel system, which is set to be made mandatory in England, would work. And then he said he wouldn't. And then the Vaccines Minister, Nadine Zahawi, who was doing what we call the rounds this morning, confirmed that he wouldn't actually be setting out anything today, or indeed tomorrow, so not this week. I think I heard him use the phrase in a few days, whatever that may mean. And that suggests to me that things are in an almighty mess. Now, add to that an interview I heard with the head of Best Western Hotels? Is that what they're called? Or it's Great Western Railways, Best Western Hotels? A big, big hotel chain that has the wherewithal and the infrastructure to play a big part in any compulsory quarantine. So, leaving aside worries about how you'd get people from airside to hotel, other countries have coped, but doing it without having major players in the hotel world on board strikes me as impossible. Perhaps I'm wrong. I could well be wrong. I don't think I am, nor do you. How on earth are you going to do a quarantine hotel system without having hotels involved? And one of the hotel chains cited as being integral to the plans was the Best Western hotel chain. And the head of the Best Western hotel chain was on the radio this morning, essentially saying he's heard butt kiss about what is likely to happen. Apart from the vaguest inquiries, I think, at the very outset, absolutely nothing. Which suggests to me that any plans that are on the way with regard to a so-called quarantine hotel are not very advanced. Because as far as we're aware, no hoteliers are currently involved. That's a lovely word, hoteliers. And that would not make sense to me if it weren't for the conversation that we'd had in the last hour. How can you be talking publicly about quarantine hotels without having any hoteliers involved? Talking publicly about the imminent introduction of quarantine hotels when there's not a hotelier in the land who knows anything about it? I would not actually think that was possible, or I wouldn't have done, until we ended up being a country where the Prime Minister says there's no border in the Irish Sea, but Michael Gove is negotiating with the European Union to reduce the impact of the border in the Irish Sea. So once you're in the upside down, I worry, and of course, you know, we go back to the base, or whatever you want to call it, who love all this because it upsets people who understand things. And I get that, actually. There's no way of explaining it charitably, but if you've spent your whole life not understanding things, I can see why the frustration and the fury of people who understand things does delight you, because it must feel as if the boot's on the other foot. Well, I've never understood anything. So I love this, because all the people who understand things are the ones getting really frustrated and confused and angry. And those of us who don't understand anything, we've all been given a flag to wave and a little cap to doff, and it's great. You know, go Boris. He's doing his best. Highest death toll in the world. Yeah, but he's doing his best. Leave him alone, you lefty. So I do, genuinely. I know it sounds facetious, and I am being a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but I get it. I completely get it. If you've spent your whole life not understanding anything and hating all foreigners, this is flipping golden for you. This is the best it's ever going to get. There's no border in the Irish Sea. Well, there is, because Michael Gove's negotiating to... Yeah, but there isn't. Lefties. It's incredible. When are we going to introduce the quarantine hotels? I don't know. When has Boris Johnson said we're going to? Well, he said Matt Hancock would make an announcement today, but he isn't going to make an announcement today. Yeah, take that, lefties. They haven't got a clue what they're doing, and you could die as a result. And then people like me say, well, so could you. And they go, nah, common sense, innit? Personal responsibility. It's nuts. And the scary thing is, for you and, of course, for me, the scary thing is that once you do take two steps back from the canvas, the entire blooming picture is crystal clear. I think I've jettisoned. I still suffer slightly from Matt Hancock syndrome. I think because he sits in such stark contrast to the rest of the cabinet, by dint of not looking like a sociopath, I still have a bit of a soft spot for Matt Hancock. I know. It seems very odd to say that in the same breath as pointing out the death toll, but I think... when the dust settles, when the inquiries occur, when the historians get stuck in, we will discover that Matt Hancock actually wanted to do a lot of the things that weren't done and should have been done, but got overruled. Now, you can say by all means that he should have resigned on principle, or he should have walked away, or you can even go back to his very passionate defence of membership of the European Union and claim that he sacrificed honour upon the altar of self-advancement, and I can't prove that you're wrong, one way or the other. But you know what? Having a negative view about everybody who is in any way politically opposed to you, it's exhausting and it's not helpful. So for now, I retain my cautious regard for Matt Hancock, and I accept all of the abuse happily that you will throw in my direction as a result. All right? Just so you know, I have fully abandoned the Rishi Sunak fan club. I increasingly, the more I learn about Rishi Sunak, the more I wonder whether he will actually turn out to have been one of the greatest culprits of the catastrophe and the carnage, as opposed to, as I naively thought at the outset of Eat Out to Help Out and in the aftermath of the original furlough scheme, I thought he was playing a blinder. Again, simply because he's sat in stark contrast to the rest of the cabinet. Matt Hancock doesn't look like a sociopath, so I feel warmly towards him, and Rishi Sunak seemed to actually have put a shift in and to have worked hard and to have understood what he was talking about. So in contrast to the rest of the cabinet, Rishi Sunak looked golden for a while, but I've abandoned that since discovering the kind of people he was inviting in to the inner circle to advise on lockdowns, and they were, well, you know, some of the bangiest headbangers in Britain. So all of that is kind of out there. Against that backdrop, it's hard to avoid the conclusion that they haven't got a clue what they're doing. That's why my regard for Hancock is still in place, because he's pulled off the vaccines. He's absolutely nailed it. He understood it, and they threw the dice slightly, but they came up 666. So I'm sticking to that for now, but as ever, you know, there's a brilliant book published last year contended in the very first line, there is no point having a mind if you never change it. So the evidence has emerged, and I've changed my mind about Rishi Sunak. As it stands, I still think Hancock deserves an even break, but I'll change my mind if the facts change or if the dust settles in a way I'm not currently expecting. So here is Rob Patterson, the chief executive of Best Western Hotels, and I'll play you approximately 38 seconds of his words from this morning. But I want you to listen to them very much through the lens. I know you can't listen through a lens, Keith. Just give me a break, will you? It's all live, you know. None of this is scripted, which will come as a surprise to precisely nobody. So I want you to listen to Rob Patterson, the chief executive of Best Western Hotels, in the context of my observation that the quarantine hotel system that all experts believe we should probably now introduce, and which the government have said they are going to introduce, my cautious suggestion that it's going to be very hard to have quarantine hotels if you haven't got any hoteliers involved. And this fella is the chief executive of a hotel chain that kept getting mentioned in the context of quarantine hotels. So let's find out what he knows.
I think in any normal company, if you went out and announced a program nationally and you hadn't thought about how you were going to plan that and you hadn't spoken to the people involved, I'm not sure I'd have a job if I did that in my company. And to this day, it seems logical to me that you'd sit down with the airlines, the airport operators and the hotel operators and thrash this out on a Zoom call or whatever it might be. And to this day, we simply haven't heard anything despite multiple offers. And we have connections in Singapore and Australia and New Zealand who are doing this that we could learn from and easily get on the phone and offer their support. And it's we're just a bit surprised that we just haven't heard anything.
Take that, lefties. The government hasn't even spoken to the hotels about keeping us alive. Let me drink those Remainer tears. Listen to this again, seriously. This is Boris Johnson's Brexit Britain in a blooming nutshell.
I think in any normal company, if you went out and announced a program nationally and you hadn't thought about how you were going to plan that and you hadn't spoken to the people involved, I'm not sure I'd have a job if I did that in my company. And to this day, it seems logical to me that you'd sit down with the airlines, the airport operators and the hotel operators and thrash this out on a Zoom call or whatever it might be. And to this day, we simply haven't heard anything despite multiple offers. And we have connections in Singapore and Australia and New Zealand who are doing this that we could learn from and easily get on the phone and offer their support. And it's we're just a bit surprised that we just haven't heard anything.
Just a bit surprised that we haven't heard anything. Except Downing Street yesterday saying that Matt Hancock would today be laying out the details of the entire system. And then the vaccines minister appeared on the telly and the radio to say that actually he wouldn't. Oh, heads, tails, do a lap of honour however it lands. I know you're a little baffled by how chirpy I am, but you have to. You have to stay upbeat, you know. You can be honest and happy. If you allow these bees to grind you down, then their job gets even easier. And you know, we have so much evidence wherever we turn of how it works. Why on earth aren't we talking about the fact that none of the hoteliers have been consulted about the fact that the quarantine hotels answer? Well, because today I'd like you to get cross about a priest who said something rude about Captain Tom and then apologised. Go on, give me a call and tell me how cross you are about that. How many people died yesterday of COVID? And now it would appear, the vaccine success notwithstanding and continuing, it would appear that we're doing what we did last time round with the borders, because these new variants, these scary new variants, are potentially coming into the country at a rate of 21,000 carriers a day. Potentially. That's a massive sort of, well, it's a bit tabloidy. Every single person coming into the country could conceivably, theoretically, have a new variant of COVID-19. Obviously they won't. But if this was right-wing media, that's what we'd say. You know, 21,000 people, what, they could end up living next door to you. That kind of thing. Happily, we're a little bit better than that, but I don't get it. I just don't get it. What's happening at the borders? Why haven't we got quarantine hotels? Why do the people running hotel chains tell us, or tell the BBC actually, that clip earlier, they've heard butt kiss from Boris Johnson. Peter is in Bedale in Yorkshire. Hello, Peter.
How are you, sir?
I'm very well. Why have they got you down as Bedale today?
Well, because that's actually, I live just south of Bedale. Business is at Thirsk, and that's why I'm usually there. That's why I'm usually there.
So you're at home in Bedale as opposed to at work in Thirsk. This is the
I'm
lockdown.
working at home in Bedale.
This is bespoke.
With a business where most of the people are furloughed and waiting desperately for the 8th of March.
This is bespoke radio presenting. The personal interest that I take in Peter is an example to all of my colleagues. Right, where are we? What's going on with the borders? Where are the quarantine hotels? And what day is it?
Okay, so this time last year, we spoke about emergency planning.
Yes,
and I had a certain sense of confidence that there would be plans.
Good grief, you
In
did.
fact, a radio station was listening to your show, called me up and asked me to do it for them later.
Is that right? Could you just tell my listeners who aren't paying attention, for example, Keith, what you used to do for a living?
I used to be the Deputy Chief Constable of North Yorkshire.
So you know of what you speak.
I genuinely thought, because when I was around, we exercise and all those sort of things, and I genuinely thought that they would say, right, we've got this respiratory disease, and so we need to be thinking about ventilators and what can happen next and what can happen next. There's a question that is attributed to Admiral Yamamoto at the Pearl Harbor briefing of the Naval High Command, the Japanese Naval High Command. They said this will give us naval control of the Pacific for 18 months. And Admiral Yamamoto is said to have replied, what happens next? And that's the question you've got to keep asking during the course of this. And the bit that I said to your colleague, Keith, I'm almost speechless today that they haven't got hotels lined up in case they have to push the button marked quarantine.
Well, they've only had a year.
Exactly. You know, that I have desperately, because I pay a direct debit to this lot, I have desperately tried not to be the Harry Enfield character who sticks his head up above the fence and says, I wouldn't do it that way, I'll do it a different way.
You should have done it like that.
Yeah. And yet, time after time, you get to the next stage in the process, and it comes as a great big surprise. Whether it's school meals or whether it's, testing and the tracking of people, we're going to need people to call around to people's houses. People are self-isolating. We need people to go and make sure
they're not, as Dido Harding revealed yesterday, before claiming
nobody's going around to ask them.
20,000 people not self-isolating, and of course nobody could have known that this virus was going to mutate like all viruses throughout history have always done, bless her.
But I think we need to be just a little bit careful about the mutation thing.
Yes.
Because I read Times, and I think perhaps in something else good, just recently, that the virus will mutate even amongst our own population. So, yes, the South Africa thing, but actually we're quite capable of mutating.
So you mean even if we keep, well, we did, didn't we? We cultivated the so-called Kent mutation. So even if we keep, but they're not popping up at a rate of knots yet. So, I mean, we're better off keeping people out, particularly from countries where the new mutations already are. But of course it doesn't, as you quite rightly remind us, it doesn't prevent mutations from occurring independently within these islands.
The bit that's irritating and I think makes one's confidence wane, and that's the bit, we've got to have confidence in the leadership. And the bit that is making confidence wane is, this is going to change and vary and all of that. We've got to live with that. But the bit is, this business of not apparently not being able to join the dots between saying something, we're going to do this, and we're going to announce it then, and then suddenly you discover, and you've played the clip, I heard it on that programme myself,
yes,
where the guy is saying, nobody's spoken to us. This is just not good enough.
I don't want to sound as if I'm maligning any of my other callers, but there is a weight to your words, Peter, as a result of your police service, and indeed the very, very high rank, almost the highest rank at which you ended up, and you would have had responsibility for managing crises of a very different sort and a very different flavour. And that, I mean, unlike perhaps the people who are more performative in their contributions, like, for example, Gobs on Sticks and radio presenters, that there is a genuine sense of wonder behind what you're you actually can't believe what you're seeing. Am I right?
There's parts of it that I am finding truly astonishing. For example, we've spoken about the Great Heck Rail crash.
Yes.
Okay, on that day, we had a plan. We had a significant number, unfortunately, of people who died.
Yes.
And under those circumstances, you have to take them to a temporary mortuary.
Right.
And I had to explain that at some length to the coroner, who wanted them to go to York Hospital. And I said, you can't do that. There isn't enough room. You know, and it is literally that sort of thing. You have the plan, you deal with the plan, and it's all worked out, and you've exercised it. And since I discovered there's another thing as well. We've been a bit like Singapore that had, do you remember, they had all the guns pointing in the wrong direction. We were prepared for an influenza pandemic, and we don't seem to have been prepared or responded to this as a respiratory syndrome pandemic.
Okay.
And that, I think, started us off poorly. But then people pretending everything's wonderful when it's not does not help your decision-making as you go forward. And we did too much of that in the beginning.
And if I were to nudge you into territory where you're less comfortable and ask you to speculate, why do you think we have gone from... Well, why have we gone from a position that you presumed confidence in, because your experience and your understanding of issues led you to conclude that they must actually have a handle on it somehow and somewhere, and now you've ended up 10 months later observing the reality, the observable reality of this absolute clown car of a plan, with Downing Street saying yesterday that Matt Hancock would announce something today that the vaccines minister has now said no, he won't, and the people he was going to be talking about have said we haven't heard hide nor hair from him for weeks. How do you account for it?
My comment would be informed by, why isn't somebody asking the question, why didn't we sort this out? You know, inverted commas on, why did we not sort this out last March? Australia, did it. Now, they've got previous experience of a respiratory syndrome pandemic in the
Southeast. No, but I don't know. That's not an answer. I want. Why? How do you think, or why do you think they're still pressing on with? Why are we still being told on a Wednesday that we're going to hear from a minister on a Thursday, but actually later on Thursday it turns out we're not? And why do the hoteliers know nothing about the plan for the quarantine hotels that Matt Hancock was supposed to announce today? What's happened, do you think? Put your detective hat back on rather than your deputy chief constable hat, and tell me what the motive is. What's the motive, Peter? It's all about that. I've been watching a lot of Vera. What's the motive?
I simply cannot understand. I think there are those who say it is due to an absence of talent. I find that hard to believe.
Well, I do as well.
Because I know Rishi, for obvious reasons. I know Rishi. He's largely done things right.
Okay.
And he's done a hell of a lot outside of the normal party comfort zone in terms of spending huge amounts of money.
Okay.
But there's a bit there where you just think, how have people with this complete absence of talent got to the position where they are? And the Yorkshire Post frequently talk to Gavin Williamson. Yeah. And I find it, I find their analysis to appear accurate.
Yes, the Yorkshire Post is perhaps reminding some of the national newspapers what proper journalism looks like, or indeed what speaking truth to power looks like. So in the absence of any other explanation, Peter, we're left with this text that came in at 10:28. And I don't think it describes you, but how are they getting away? I think you guys on the left hate the fact that he seems to be getting away with it. Long may it continue. Until people care about being...
Remind you, James, remind your texter what I said earlier. I pay a direct debit to this lot. I'm a member of their party.
There you go.
I am disappointed at the performance of some of the ministerial team. I think the vaccinations is a standout success. I think what Rishi has done has largely been very successful. I think they've just not seen what's coming. And friends of mine who are members of Parliament,
yes.
One in particular,
yes.
have voiced similar things. I can't name names.
No, of course you can't.
Fair.
No, nor would I expect you to.
And nor am I spinning you a yarn. I'm not that sort of person.
No, I know you're
we
not.
Really
Spoken
do
many
need
times.
to get. We really do need to get a proper grip on all of the issues to do with this.
And if we don't, more people will die. More people will die. I mean, that's the astonishing thing, is that this is about avoidable deaths. It's not about flipping culture wars or statues or Chaucer or diversity appearing on Britain's Got Talent or Captain Tom or anything. It's about avoidable deaths. And there is a card-carrying member of the Conservative Party who rose to one of the highest ranks in the British police force, sharing my profound, heartbreaking misgivings about why the government is apparently treating the concept of quarantine hotels with all of the competence and all of the clarity that it's treated absolutely everything else except the vaccines. I depart from Peter's analysis on Rishi Sunak, as I explained earlier, but hey, we can have a friendly disagreement on that. It's what politics used to be like. The hotels. How can we have quarantine hotels up and running anytime soon if there is, as far as we can tell, not a hotelier in the land who has been signed up or given the detail? Quite a funny thing on the LBC Twitter feed. They put out a clip of me asking that question, to which someone called Craig replied by calling me a very rude name and citing the example of Best Western hotels, which I mentioned to you earlier, were always mentioned alongside talk of the quarantine hotels. But of course, as you heard earlier, the chief executive of Best Western Hotels has stated on the record this morning that he's heard that he is still in the dark regarding what the plans are. So fair play to Craig. He might have changed his mind or taken his head out of his backside, but he has at least deleted his tweet. Well done, Craig. Be like Craig. Actually, don't be like Craig. Avoid looking stupid in public by not looking stupid in public. Luke's in Poole. The hotel question. Luke, can you help?
I'm going to try and avoid looking stupid. So can we...
You're being good company. You're being good company, Luke. Don't worry.
Yeah, I wanted to try and give you a little bit of context and my kind of opinion on it. Might be right. I think I possibly am. So we have a hotel at Gatwick Airport. It's a beautiful little boutique hotel right on the side of the runway. But I wouldn't expect to be contacted.
Because of the numbers, because you can't do the numbers.
Exactly. And I think for the very same reason, Best Western wouldn't be contacted. Yeah, they're a mid-scale, mid-sized hotel group. Effectively, they're a marketing consortium. So there's lots of stakeholders. All the hotels are independently owned and operated, which is great, and I'd love for independent hotels to be involved. But if I was the government, I wouldn't be approaching them. When you look at the big boys, they have 800-bedroom hotels that are attached to the terminal buildings all across the UK. You can turn to them and say, right, guys, sort this out for us, and I think they would willingly do so.
Have you got any knowledge of them doing that? Are you aware of any?
I've been given anecdotal examples of that they have been contacted and that they are in communications. And if you look at it in practical terms, if you take the Australian model that seems to work quite well, you would need one security guard on a corridor of 60 bedrooms. It makes perfect sense. Whereas unfortunately, Best Western hotels are, great. We've had a couple of Best Western hotels in our past, but they tend to be more rural. Like I say, there's lots of stakeholders. I'm not aware that they've got many that are actually on airports, really.
So it's probably slightly I understand why the chief executive was booked by the BBC this morning, but it's probably based on a slight misapprehension that because their name kept getting mentioned alongside talk of quarantine hotels. But we're not, you'd expect perhaps a little more flesh on the bones of the plan by now if it was going to be appearing and operating anytime soon. You and I, between us, I'm a journalist of sorts, you're a hotelier, neither of us can name a hotel company that is already signed up to this.
No, and I think this should have been done a year ago, but, that's by the by, isn't it? But
it is.
I think, if I was the government, and I'm pretty sure they are, I would be speaking to Hilton, Intercontinental, these guys that have hotels all over the UK in the right places.
Well, fingers crossed, because whatever your politics, we all want this to work. That is, of course, the point. And maybe there is a slight red herring with that Best Western angle, but I'm grateful to Luke, as ever, on the programme, for if he has set us straight. I'm grateful to him for setting us straight.
Seconds to go. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.